I'm Paula Camperman, Outreach Program Manager for the Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance, and I'm joined today by Lisa Beyer, and today we're going to do some more trash talk, this time about food scrap diversion.
This is a big topic.
It is.
Yeah, this is something that happened during the pandemic, and I don't think everybody really understands it.
No.
Including myself. So I'm anxious to learn more about it and ask some questions.
That's great. Well, starting July 1st, 2020, a food scrap ban went into effect for all Vermonters in Vermont. So that essentially meant anyone who was a resident, a business owner, anything. Up until that point, we had been doing some graduated implementation of a food scrap ban, from starting with the very largest of producers and working our way down so that by 2020, it would cover the entire state.
Okay.
So what that means is our food scraps don't go in the trash, but there are other ways to divert them to keep them from going into the landfill. The reason we do this is because methane that is produced by the breakdown of food underground in a landfill is 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide by producing greenhouse gases, which create climate change, warm the planet. Right. So as you've heard probably from the recent COP26 talks over in Scotland, where they were talking about methane, and they were trying to control methane, this is one of the ways to do that, is to reduce the amount of food scraps we're putting in the ground.
Okay.
So
then where are the food scraps going?
So there are three ways you can divert your food scraps. You can compost in the backyard, and that is any number of ways you could compost. You can put it in a compost bin, which you buy commercially or build out of pallets, or so you can just compost in a pile if you want, if you don't have bears. Or you can do a solar digester, which is a compost bin that is submerged somewhat underground. So the compost breaks down and it basically leaches down into the ground and just then only needs to be emptied out every few years.
So that does not produce the same methane gas that they're concerned about in the landfills?
That's correct, yeah.
Because it's on such a small scale.
It breaks down properly. It doesn't just build up underground.
Okay.
It's not sealed off. That's anaerobic.
Okay.
So we're doing aerobic because there's air and there's moisture and there's breakdown and there's the work of the organisms to help break it down. So that's okay. The other thing is taking food scraps and bringing them to the transfer station for a commercial composting process, in which they use windrows and a number of different mechanical, big scale breakdown of food by adding the browns and the greens that you would in a compost bin in your backyard, but on a much more sophisticated recipe formulation.
So are those, so the compost or food scraps, I should say, that are collected here at our transfer station, where do they go?
Well, in Bennington, there's actually a commercial compost facility owned by Casella, which is right behind the transfer station. So they have this large setup where they are actually bringing in commercial compost from companies and from the transfer station, and other materials that they use to make the compost that is then sold to landscapers and highway departments and people that want a truckload to put off their lawn or their garden or whatever. And it's used for an amendment to soil. So what it does is it builds moisture into the soil. It keeps it from having erosion issues along roadsides.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that once before.
Yep, and it also holds 20 times its weight in water, so it helps keep droughts from occurring on your lawn or in the garden or on roadsides. And it's a wonderful thing. I can't say enough about it. Yeah.
So how has the launch of the diversion program gone since July 20th?
Well, there's a third version of how to get.
Oh, sorry.
There's also curbside collection.
Right.
Which is important to understand because there is a component of the law in which curbside collection isn't something that is automatically available to everyone. When Vermont passed the law in 2020, they made curbside collection only required to be offered to residents of housing units with 4 or more residence units. So if you live in a single family home, your hauler isn't required to provide for curbside collection to you. However,
Okay.
there are haulers that are getting into the game, and not so much in the southern part of the state, but the northern part of the state has seen an explosion of mom and pop type collection companies. You know,
Okay.
a couple of pickup trucks and 5-gallon buckets, and you know, for $10 a week, they'll come and pick up your food scraps, whatever, and then
Okay.
you get a new scrap bucket, and that's easy. Casella did inform me that they are starting to offer the service to Bennington customers,
Oh,
along with their regular curbside service, so that is encouraging.
that is.
I do understand All American Waste also offers curbside collection as part of their service. So check with your hauler. They may offer it. They're not required by law, but they may offer it. They are required to offer it to commercial facilities and, as I said, multi-dwelling residential units with 4 or more units.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for me, the issue is I've been composting, you know, fruits, vegetables, those kinds of things. But the idea of putting meats and stuff in there and dairy is not something that we're comfortable with. So, what would you suggest, or how do we make this transition? Because it's been a difficult one for us.
Okay. Well, meats and bones, you don't want to put in a backyard composting program at all because
Right.
you don't get the temperature high enough in a compost bin to break it down properly and kill the bacteria that is present in meat and bones. So throw that in the trash. It's perfectly legal. It's okay.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not, I guess maybe the next question is what's considered a food scrap?
Food scrap is anything that comes out of the ground. So your fruits, your vegetables, dairy products are okay. Coffee grounds,
Yeah, we
bits
do
of
that.
newspaper, because you have a ratio of browns to green. So you're going to go 3 browns to 1 green. So browns could be leaves. It could be wood
Grass.
chips. Well, grass is a green until it becomes completely dry, and then it's a carbon.
Then it's-
yeah. But paper towels that are unbleached
Right.
And haven't been handled with chemicals.
Right.
In a commercial facility, you have more flexibility because they get to the higher temperatures.
Okay.
So if you're going to do commercial drop-off of your food scraps at a transfer station, you can include meat and bones,
Okay.
and that's fine.
So that I think has been a confusion for me and maybe some of our viewers when I thought that it included all food, that no food went in the trash.
Yes, it does mean that. No food except meat and bones if you are backyard composting. If you're taking your food scraps to the transfer station, everything goes.
Okay, so the people that are backyard composting get a little
They get a
variance.
variance,
here.
that's right.
Okay.
Because the temperatures don't get high enough. Now, there's some very sophisticated composters that could probably pull it off. But you need a fairly good sized pile to get the heat up high enough. And
be able to
yeah,
break
and
it
I wouldn't
down.
recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. So
Because that was
yeah.
something that people were concerned about. I know about attracting wildlife and you know things like that by putting out the meats and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
you won't have that problem with the meats and bones. Now, naturally, there are wildlife that can get attracted to the compost piles if they don't have enough coverage on them, like the browns that go on top. Bears can come out, but sometimes bears are attracted by other things and they happen to stumble upon your compost bin.
Right.
So some
right.
things to remember is make sure you take all your bird feeders down in the spring and check your trash cans to make sure they're not attracting the animals. Check with your neighbors to make sure their bird feeders are down and they are not attracting animals with their trash cans. Because sometimes that's what it is, and then they see the compost. They don't
Right.
necessarily know
Right.
the compost is there
Right.
until they come upon other things.
Well, I think I was confused about what was going in, what was required to go in.
Okay.
So I think that answers a lot of questions for me, and hopefully it answers for everybody else. But so would that apply to fish as well?
Yeah, you don't want to put any animal,
Okay.
fish in the, just
Okay, so
take it to the trash and put it
proteins.
in the, bones, fish, meat,
Okay.
pork, Keep it in the trash,
Okay, so I feel better about my composting track record.
Yeah, good.
Good.
So some of the other things to keep in mind is reducing food scraps to begin with by being more conscious of how we consume our food.
Right.
The typical family of 4 spends $1,500 on food that they never eat because so much of it is wasted by either mismanaging it or buying it and never eating it. So some things we try to help people understand is good practices by understanding packaging that have sell by and eat by, consume by, whatever dates.
Yep.
Those are just suggested dates. There is no federal regulated program that sets that program up. So use your nose, use your eyes to help you understand whether food is still good to eat. Don't use the sell-by date. I've eaten stuff well past date. I'll look at, okay, there's nothing growing on it, we're good, you know.
Well, we just made something the other night that was well before the sell-by date, but it just did not smell right and did not look right, and yeah,
That's
we
good.
had to scrap it. But I definitely am one of those people that kind of feels as though that date is, etched in stone. So it's an interesting thing that I think that consumers, we've been taught that, and when I'm at the grocery store and I, buying chicken or whatever, and I look at the date and I have to think about, well, am I going to be able to cook that before that date? Or, oh, we have to have this for dinner tonight because it's going to, go bad. So it's interesting to hear that those things aren't necessarily regulated.
No, it's really to promote product freshness from a marketing standpoint so that the manufacturer of the product can get the item to you. It helps the staff at the grocery store get the stock rotated properly so they understand how old the stock is, they move it along, and then they can also have pull dates for themselves when to pull the material off the product off the shelf because they don't feel it's sellable for them and they donate it, or dispose of it however they want to handle it. But it does not mean that it's not edible at all.
Right.
It really isn't. And so
you have to really rely on your common sense.
Yeah, exactly. And also part of the other thing that you want to also do to try to reduce the amount of waste is plan meals accordingly to what you have on hand first versus saying, well, I'm just going to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. It keeps the waste down. Set up an area in your refrigerator where you have things you can always count on that are slightly older that need attention to be eaten first. Keeping your refrigerator relatively empty is better than keeping it full from a inventory standpoint to understand what you have.
Right.
If it's chock full of things, you can't see behind the things in front to know last week's leftovers are sitting there turning into another life form because nobody's ever bothered to find them because they don't see them there.
Right.
Or as I always joke around, my kids all know how to rotate stock when they bring the groceries home, how to put everything in.
Right.
For us, it's, the newest goes on the left, the oldest is on the right. We pull from the right, just the way maybe I'm a little anal, but it works because then we're getting the stuff rotated properly.
I think that everybody watching wishes that they had your mindset when it came to the refrigerator because it's kind of a free-for-all.
Yeah, it can be.
Most of us.
It can be. Or I put in a Post-it note because I have a household of adults at this point, and I'll say eat me first, with a Post-it note, or this has got to be eaten. Try this first. Don't forget this is here.
I know we all hate to throw out food.
Yeah.
But sometimes,
it's unavoidable.
things
It is.
get the best of us, and but. So, in some respects, the sell-by date may be incentive to use it and not lose it.
Right.
So you
Hope
could
so.
look at it.
As opposed to, oh, it's out of date, and then chuck it. And that's not really
right.
what we want to see either.
So
open it up first and go,
open it up
fine.
and make sure it's,
Yeah, and I think that's key. Also, understanding that if you have food and you're not going to eat it, you're probably not going to eat it, share it with others. So, make something of it, bring it to your coworkers to share it with neighbors. If you have a food pantry in the area, check with them. They may be accepting perishable food. And call them first, though. Don't just drop it off on the doorstep. To be considerate. And then you can bring these things into them, and they can make use of them so it doesn't go.
Those are good ideas.
Then the next thing is, if you're not going to be able to use it, try to find a farmer. Believe it or not, the highest and best use of food. So if we can't eat it, can we get a farmer to use it for his livestock?
Okay.
Can we then, or compost it so it doesn't go in the trash? That's, it's still being used in some way, shape, or form. Ideally, you want to make the highest and best use of food. And even then some, don't buy it in the first place if you don't need it. So as we come into the holiday season, we're going to go through a lot of food. A lot of gatherings. We have a lot of people come together. We want to have a bountiful looking table.
Yes.
And there's ways we want to try to reduce the amount of waste. Charcuterie boards are lovely, but unless you're going to wipe them clean by the end of the night, they're hard to, keep using over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like a sour pill here, but they are ones that can create a lot of waste. The other thing is there's a website called savethefood.com that has a guesstimator. If you're entertaining this holiday season and you've got a lot of company coming over, rather than try to wing it, come up with some ideas about how many you need to serve, how much food to buy.
Right.
This will help you
not over-purchase.
It'll help you
estimate
for you, so you know how many pounds of meat or produce you need to buy for whatever it is you're making. They also have some great recipes for leftovers, so you can make new things out of it. So if you're sick and tired of turkey after day 5, you can make it into something else.
Right. Those are good ideas. One question that came to mind, and I know that we're running short on time, but I know we did this during the pandemic, was subscription boxes. Food, subscriptions. And I'm curious, in my mind, there's no waste in the food that we're purchasing because it is completely portioned out to the recipe. So we're finding that we have much less food waste with those subscription boxes. Well, with the particular one that we use. So I was just wondering if you had any opinions about that. I mean,
these are for prepared meals that you're talking about, or actual like produce boxes?
It's the one that we have used is HelloFresh, and you order the meal and it delivers all the ingredients that you need to cook that meal. And it's exact portions of everything.
Yes, it does create less waste on the food side. The other thing you have to take into consideration is the carbon footprinting. And I don't know that it's a bad thing necessarily, because I've heard good and bad about both. It's sustainable packaging if they're aiming for that. It is also perhaps less because they're getting material locally. They're sourcing their produce locally and their food locally. That could be good as well. One of the food subscriptions I use is just for produce. So I get organic produce that's being saved from being dumped because it's not good enough for the grocery stores.
Something like Misfits or something like that?
I've used Misfits Market, which is a good way to do it.
Right, so it's fruits or vegetables that aren't pretty, but they still taste the same and are just as delicious as...
Yeah, they're otherwise destined to the landfill or to the food in a feedlot. And that's what we can do to try to... But there's a number of different ways. And the idea is just to try to go with less if we don't need it,
Right, and that's what made me think of the subscription boxes because there are no leftovers, there are no, you get the exact ingredients at the exact portion that you need. So it's interesting, but I understand the fact that, it's cardboard boxes, it's the,
transportation,
and all that.
And that's something an economist can walk over and figure out
right.
another day.
Yeah.